This is Corolla Digital.
This is We the People.
What is wrong with our country?
I don't want to believe what you believe, and you can't make.
I want to hear why it's bad to feel good.
These two political gangs don't have your best interest in mind.
Makes me proud to be an American. Makes me even smarter to be off the grid.
Stay vigilant, people.
Abraham, light up that joint.
Welcome back, vigilant listeners, to We the People podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Ventura. Today we've got a big interview coming up the later part of the hour. Former Baltimore Ravens player Chris Carr joins me to shed some light on the current wave of scandals that have hit the NFL. Not only that, Carr is also a law student today at George Washington University, a good old GW, and he's got a few things to say about the people running this country. So don't go away. You're not going to want to miss this interview. But first, let's turn to our latest headlines, and it's ad-lib time with the body. Alex at the command center, what's the latest headlines you got for me today?
All right, Governor. Well, your favorite war hawk, John McCain, spoke out again this week about our crisis with ISIS. Speaking with CNN and following President Obama's remarks on 60 Minutes that the U.S. didn't see the threat of ISIS coming, McCain argued that not only did the intelligence community understand the threat that ISIS posed, but that the current situation the U.S. faces is, quote, a direct result of Obama's failure to leave a residual force behind in Iraq. McCain reaffirmed his assertion of Obama's failure by saying, this idea that we didn't know what was happening, of course we knew it. We saw it happening. He also said, we predicted this and watched it. It was like watching a train wreck and warning every step of the way that this was happening. Do you agree or disagree with McCain on this one? Should Obama have intervened sooner?
No. Wait a minute. We got to go back and get to this first, Alex. What right? I'm astounded of the hypocrisy that any Republican could ever come forward today and accuse anyone else of a security lapse, an intelligence lapse, or anything of that nature, Alex, and I hope you know where I'm going here. The Republicans were in charge of this country, and George W. Bush was the president, along with Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice, current member at Augusta, Georgia Golf Club today, and chooses who gets to go to the finals of football today in the college level. That's the type of expert she is. Where I'm going on this is this, Alex. Who are the Republicans to say one thing about not reading intelligence or seeing anything when it was on 9/11, the largest attack in U.S. history happened on their watch? Am I not correct on that?
You are.
Well, who are they then to point fingers at anybody? And I'm not backing Obama. You know I don't. I despise both parties. But who the hell is any Republican to point fingers and say that we didn't get intelligence right? I remember Condoleezza Rice and the August 6th memo where it said bin Laden to hijack planes and ram them into buildings, and she looked all astounded and said, I had no idea he would do this. Well, excuse me, it said it right on the paper that was just read. So who is a Republican like John McCain to accuse someone else? What would he have us do now? Impeach Obama? Should we start a congressional investigation because they screwed up? Well, McCain and the Republicans screwed up and 9/11 occurred. No one got fired from their jobs for 9/11, did they? So why should anybody get fired for their jobs over this one? And in fact, why don't they take responsibility? They only go back to us leaving troops into Iraq. Why did we put troops in Iraq in the first place? Let's go back to there, John McCain. Why did we invade, overthrow the Iraqi government and Saddam Hussein, and install our puppet government that obviously George Bush put in and failed miserably, and allowed ISIS to rise up? I'll give you the big picture, Alex. They all knew this was going to happen from the very start because we are a war economy now, and we must feed our war machine, and which our economy is to prosper. This is the best wrestling shit I've ever seen, when John McCain comes on and gives you an interview like that. because that's what you got here. They all knew what was going to happen. This is all part of the big picture to keep us at war, to feed the war machine, which must gobble up our resources just like the Roman empires did. Does that answer your question, Alex?
It does, and let's keep talking about the war machine. The U.S. Air Force sent its newly minted F-22 Raptor stealth fighters into battle against ISIS for the first time ever, the Daily Beast reports. The $150 million jet struck an ISIS command center in Syria with a satellite-guided bomb. This first mission wasn't cheap, though. The Daily Beast estimates that missiles and airstrikes cost the U.S. at least $79 million to pull off, which is more expensive than India's mission to Mars, which was successfully completed last week. So is this a good use of our American tax dollars?
Well, absolutely. People are going to say, of course it is, Alex. They're keeping us safe. They're stopping ISIS. If we don't stop them there, then we'll be fighting them here. We've all heard that crap, haven't we? If we don't stop them over there, we'll be fighting them here. This is just the same rhetoric happening that went on 10 years ago to the buildup of the Iraq War. This is our perennial war machine. Here's the example. We now got the newly minted F-22 Raptor stealth fighters, $150 million a piece. We got to put them to some use, don't we? We can't leave them sitting in the locker room. We've built them. So that's all you got here. This is simply a great way to check them out to see if they work. Obviously they do if they were successful, so I guess we should all be patting ourselves on the back. The United States war machine has found another way to kill people, which is what we do. We are a war economy. They've made us that way, and we don't have to stay that way. Imagine if we fought a war on renewable energy, the way we would fight a war against ISIS. How quickly we could have, renewable, solar, maybe some other form of energy that would be cheap and abundant for everyone, but that would also hurt our war machine economy, wouldn't it? When each one of these costs more than sending India's mission to Mars, I think I'd rather go to Mars, personally. Keep going, Alex.
Well, let's get back to that topic of scare tactics. The group called American Freedom Defense Initiative placed ads on 100 New York City buses and 2 subway stations showing a photo of American journalists shortly before his beheading by the Islamic State militant group. The American Freedom Defense Initiative paid for a 6-ad series scheduled to run for a month on the city's mass transit system. The ad campaign suggests, according to Reuters, that Islam is inherently violent and extremist and calls for the end of American aid to Islamic countries. James Foley's family filed a complaint against the ads, and now they are being altered to include an unidentifiable severed head held by the masked militant seen wielding a knife in the video of Foley's beheading. Having lived in and reported from communities in which nearly everyone was of Muslim faith, he had great respect for the religion and those who practiced it, the Foley family lawyer wrote, referring to the late journalist.
Well, this is all part of the ground roots plan. I mean, does this not fit perfectly a nice religious war? To stop the Muslims, we got to go get them. And, none of this would be happening, in my opinion, if we weren't over there occupying their countries and telling them how to govern each other. If we would get out of there like Ronald Reagan did in Lebanon when the Marine barracks was hit with the car bomb and the tragic event of us being attacked and 200 and some of our brave Marines were killed. What more initiative could you use to go to war? Yet Ronald Reagan didn't go to war. Ronald Reagan got the hell out of there. He was smart enough to know, okay, we just lost these Marines. It's tragic. We're angry. But do we want to lose that many more? I mean, it's to the point now where, what are we doing? Revenge killing? Is that truly what this is all about? Are they building it into that? We just kill for revenge? And I'll tie it in right here, Alex. Again, it shows, why are you a hero if you kill for the government? And we'll pose this also. Another example of the government being more powerful than God. Because you're certainly allowed to go kill for the government, and you're made into a hero if you do it. And, God says, thou shalt not kill. And there's no asterisk in there. There's no thing that says except when doing it for government. He didn't include that. That could have been on the tablet that Mel Brooks dropped. When they brought down that other tablet, that got broke, and it ended up the Ten Commandments, that it said that exception to the rule when used to support government interaction in other countries or something. I don't know. So here's another great example of government being more powerful than God, because you certainly can kill for government, and not only when you kill for government, you become a hero. And it's the same on the other side. When you kill for that government over there, you become a hero. So it's the same each way on both sides of the ledger, whether it's the enemy or you. In whosever eyes is opposite, you're a hero.
All right, well, let's turn to the national news, where Washington is up in arms over the recent news that an armed man who jumped the White House fence this month made it far deeper into the president's home than previously disclosed. The man, Omar J. Gonzalez, had a knife and was stopped as he tried to enter the green room, which is just a few doors away from the family dining room, according to a congressional official familiar with the incident. So reports the New York Times. Originally, it was reported that Gonzalez made it steps inside the north portico, but this latest development offers a different conclusion. So it's been unheard of in recent decades for an intruder to enter the White House, even if only a few steps inside what is supposed to be one of the most secure buildings in the world. So states the New York Times. Governor, what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, let me throw this in there. It's quite serious, but let's have some humor with it first before we get serious. He almost made it to the green room. Well, you know what would have been waiting for him in the green room, don't you, Alex?
I don't.
You don't? Oh, well, let me educate you. The green room in San Quentin, that's where you go when you're on death row. It's called the green room. Remember the movie The Green Mile? So if he was entering almost steps away from the green room and looking at the Obama administration, I'll bet you if he'd have broke through those doors, there would have been an unmanned drone waiting for him. Would have zapped his ass, and he'd be deader than a doornail and never went to trial or court or nothing. He'd be done, finished, all over, end of game. Because Alex, that was your education thing today, the green room. The green room in prisons is where guys go right before when they're on death row. That's the room you go to when they put you to death. That's why in the entertainment world, I always felt uncomfortable, because when you're doing the Tonight Show or you're doing these shows, they always have you wait in the green room, and I always go, do I have to? And they go, what's the problem? I go, that's where prisoners go on death row right before they get put to death. So, anyway, there you go. But as far as on a serious note, holy smokes, with all we're paying for Homeland Security and the billions of dollars we spent, I couldn't get that far if I charged across the Mexican border into the United States. As far as this guy got at the White House. You following me, Alex?
I am.
If I was crossing the Mexican border into the U.S., they'd probably have me contained in a shorter distance than what this guy did, scaling the fence and running into the White House. I would call that a major Secret Service violation, to the extent that, holy crap, no wonder they could assassinate John Kennedy. I mean, that's astounding that a guy could climb the fence at the White House and actually enter the president's home before being subdued. Where were the dogs? Alex, I can tell you this right now. You couldn't do that at my house, Alex. Come and try.
I'm not even going to take that challenge.
No, put it this way, Alex. On my fence, you know what I have a sign that says?
What does it say?
It has a silhouette picture of a beautiful, beautiful shepherd, and the sign on the fence at my home says, I can make it to the gate in 3 seconds. Can you? And I can't believe my house, Jesse Ventura's private home, is more secure than the president's. I'm astounded over that, especially with the money and the revenue and everything we've spent on Homeland Security. What if this guy was wired with a bomb and ran up into the president's home and detonated himself? There's a good example of why Jesse don't want to be president. When they can run up to your house and get inside your house and no one has stopped them yet, and you're the president and this is the White House, I think it goes back to the other thing I talk about too. Rather than us worrying about what's going on in the Middle East, Why aren't we taking care of what's going on in our own backyard, both with our people, with our country, with our infrastructure, and with our safety? As it appears now, even our president's not safe. He might be safer over in the Middle East than he would be here. I'm not sure. And that's a scary thought. I mean, this is the President of the United States. Where the hell was... You talk about an investigation that should happen. Heads should roll. Someone should lose their job over this. Somebody. Whoever was in charge of security or whoever dropped the ball. Because clearly, would you not agree, Alex? Someone can get into the president's home that the ball got dropped?
Oh, absolutely. It's their one mission to protect him from exactly this.
Somebody should be fired. And I'll be interested to see if anyone is. Because it seems nobody ever loses their jobs. 9/11, nobody got fired. ISIS, I don't know if people get fired from ISIS or the scandal or not. Because without 9/11, there wouldn't have been ISIS either. It all dates back to that. And the Republicans, what hypocrites. They're going to tell us about protecting the country after 9/11 happens on their watch. It's laughable.
Yeah, now let's turn to the NSA. TheHill.com reports that an executive order signed in 1981 by then-President Ronald Reagan is the primary source of authority for the National Security Agency's foreign spying, according to this newly released internal documents. Papers obtained by the American Civil Liberties Union show that the majority of the spy agency's intelligence collect is performed, quote, solely pursuant, end quote, to the order signed by Reagan and then amended by former President George W. Bush. The order, known as the Executive Order 12333, allows the NSA to collect internet communication about foreigners, including their email messages and online chats. The agency is not allowed to target people in the U.S., though Americans' communications can be incidentally picked up in the course of foreign investigation. So we have Reagan to thank for the NSA, Governor. Think we're going to hear about this in Republican circles, or will this story get buried and the Republicans will blame Obama?
Oh, absolutely. We remember Ronald Reagan's an icon who did no wrong. Everything Ronald Reagan did was for the good of all of us. If anyone believes that, well, then obviously you're on Fox News. But, and I'm not knocking Reagan. Reagan did a great thing in pulling our Marines out of Lebanon when we got hit with the car bomb there. So all presidents make good decisions. All presidents make bad decisions. People need to understand something. Just because you become the president, or just because you become a governor or a senator or a congressman, guess what? It don't mean you don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean you're not human. It doesn't mean that somehow you put your pants on 2 legs at a time. You're a human being. You're going to make errors. The question is, are they honest errors, or are they calculated errors, or are they errors of whatever? As long as they're honest errors and somebody's honest about them and it's their belief at the time or whatever, you learn to accept that. At least I do. But it's when they're dishonest errors that I have a hard time, and it seems most of the time they're dishonest errors. They're not honest ones. But again, can we stop this? Yeah. If we get a president and we get people who are so inclined to take care of our country first rather than the Middle East first, well, then we can take care of this, which would be a huge step in giving us back our freedom. I really would like America to be a country where everyone looks at us and says, look at the freedoms they have in the United States. That's what we want to aspire to, having the freedoms that they have in the United States. But they can't say that today here, because now you don't have freedom because you're under surveillance. And we're all potential terrorists now. If you speak out against your country, you may be classified a potential terrorist. Gee, is that me? Well, I'd be in good company, because they might call Jefferson, Adams, and Washington potential terrorists today. They would probably, I'd be in a lineup right with them. Anyway, continue on, Alex.
Well, officials in Ferguson, Missouri are charging nearly 10 times the cost of some of their own employees' salaries before they will agree to turn over files under public records laws about the fatal shooting of 18-year-old Michael Brown, so the Associated Press reports. Missouri's Attorney General asked for more information regarding fees related to the document requests after the AP disclosed the practice to the AG's office. As the AP reports, the move to charge high fees for public documents discourages journalists and civil rights groups from investigating the shooting. So what do you make of this, Governor?
Well, you know, Deep Throat said follow the money, and now they're going to, I guess, use money to keep the truth from us because they don't want a poor person to be able to go in and learn the truth, I guess. You better have a big checkbook if you want to go get documents that, Alex, belong to you. Let's take it to that basis for a moment, Alex. Don't we pay for government, and doesn't the government allegedly work for us?
Yes, they do.
Then why should we have to pay exorbitant fees to purchase documents that we've already paid for because they're printed on shit that we paid for? Pretty basic, isn't it? I think Jesse needs to be a judge. I've been called caveman lawyer before. I think now maybe I need a show on regular TV called Caveman Judge, where I can come in with these caveman-like thoughts that I have of simplicity and state, how on earth can our government charge us exorbitant fees for something we pay for in the first place with our tax dollars, Alex? End of story.
Well, finally, we're going to go to this last story because we're running short on time. To go along with our upcoming week on climate change on Off the Grid, the world population of fish, birds, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles fell overall by 52% between 1970 and 2010, according to the World Wildlife Fund. The WWF blamed human threats to nature for the decline, particularly in tropical regions like Latin America. There is no room for complacency, said WWF International Director General Marco Lambertini, calling for a greater focus on sustainable solutions to the impacts that people are inflicting on nature, particularly through the release of greenhouse gases. Are you a believer in this report, Governor? What do you tell those who don't believe in this data?
I tell them to get out of their smog-clogged cities where they live right now and go out into rural somewhere today, and maybe you'll have a vague memory of what it was like when you were a kid, because I've been down here in the Baja now, it's almost a decade, and I've seen the fish population down here is decreasing so dramatically. I've seen it within my decade of living here. That's not scary. You're damn right it is. Now, we're in for a battle, though, because I hate to draw religion into it, Alex, but it's difficult to persuade religious people that sometimes we're harming the planet because they're told that the planet was put here for them to use. Unfortunately, abuse comes into that use, maybe, to use and abuse. And so we need to get everybody on board with this, or we will kill ourselves. I got to give credit to Bill Maher, because Bill Maher, I watch his show periodically, and he said something that I agree totally with. He said, right now they're scaring the people in our country with ISIS, right? We need to fear ISIS, ISIS, ISIS. That's all we hear. Bill Maher's exactly correct. He said, ISIS isn't going to kill you. He said, who you should be fearing is Monsanto, because Monsanto will be who kills you, not ISIS. Every scientific indication says this is true, but of course, let's remember something. Religion is not science. So if you follow religion first and you place science second, that could be our big obstacle we face, Alex, is that people that put religion over science. I don't do that. I put science over religion. Science is always giving me new answers. Religion never does. I never get a new answer from religion. I do get new answers from science. That's it for this week's headlines. Now let's go to your questions on the editions of Ask Jesse. Alex, what do my Vigilant listeners have on their minds today?
All right, Governor, some viewers had a lot to say about your recent shows. About Face on Above Top Secret writes in regards to your show on prosecuting Bush and Cheney. Well, first off, I am not American, but I can honestly say that what those two did affected millions and perhaps billions of people elsewhere in the world, too. To dismiss this subject as not being current is to whitewash criminality. There is no time limit on a murder charge. How many hundreds of thousands of people died due to their decisions and actions? How many families have become maimed or homeless refugees? And how many quiet communities have been devastated? how many more have developed a true fear or dislike of the U.S.? If anyone disagrees with this, they can bring them both to trial and see where it goes.
Well, I can't add anything to that. That's a very interesting perspective from someone not of this country. And I think I'm glad we read this on this show, because I want to educate people of this country so that they can get perception. I live outside the country a great deal now. And I want people in this country to be able to get the perception of what people outside the country think of our country. I want the United States to be the world leader, but I want us to be a humble world leader, one who listens first and who attacks second. And I don't care. That's the way I am now. And I don't apologize for it either, Alex, so don't think you're going to get one from me.
No, I won't ask for one.
You're always waiting for me to do that, aren't you, Alex? Apologize for something.
I am not. I know better.
But I will, but I'm not a person who won't apologize. I guarantee you that. Anyway, let's move on.
All right. Others, however, did not agree with your call to prosecute Cheney and Bush. 200 plus on Above Top Secret stated this: people say Bush is a war criminal to distract from the fact that Obama is bombing 7 countries. When Cheney spent $43 million on contracts in the combat theater and Obama spends $100 million on a website that doesn't work, people shout Cheney is a war criminal. He's referencing Obamacare here, Governor. Cheney and Bush, he says, are war criminals when the left needs a distraction or a noisemaker, and that's about it.
No, because this ain't left or right. Who says Obama's not either? Our presidents today are probably all war criminals if you actually look at it. They're the leaders and we're at perennial war. We're always at war. But this war was started by Bush and Cheney. They lied about it. Bush and Cheney tortured. Bush and Cheney did all sorts of things that if another country would have did the things to us that we did to them, the other countries would be called war criminals. Torture is war crime. And where do you think the okay for it came from? Dick Cheney. He just called it enhanced interrogation. It's torture. And that's a crime of war. So for this guy, it holds no water. He's turning it political of Bush Cheney against Obama. I stand in the middle. A war crime's a war crime, and it doesn't matter who the president is. If they're committing a war crime, they're committing it. Is Obama advocating torture right now? If he is, then he's a war criminal also.
All right, let's go to this one. Bryce Long in California asks, do you think that if people in this country put as much effort into sports and entertainment that they do in politics, this country would be different? It seems to me that we are in the modern day Rome, and football and other sports and entertainment are the gladiators to keep us distracted. I wish people would wake up.
Well, Bryce, I've called our country Rome for a long time. I've stated it unequivocally, haven't I?
Oh, you have.
I've stated it unequivocally. If you look at the Roman Empire as the diagram that our country's following it to a T. Look what the major story was this week on all the national news. George Clooney's wedding. Boy, now nothing against George, but I didn't need to see it on the national news. Every national news in America covered George Clooney's wedding. And then they all fawned and they said, what a beautiful couple. Gee, what a novel concept. The guy's the most handsome bachelor movie star in the world, and they have to remark that they're a beautiful couple. If I'd have been on, I'd have did the same thing just to get a reaction and said, what an ugly couple. I mean, isn't George Clooney the epitome of man? I mean, if you're going to show a woman a poster boy for, wouldn't you put probably a picture of George Clooney? But they have to remark to you, what a lovely couple. Oh, God. Anyway, keep going, Alex. I'm getting off track.
All right.
You get what I'm saying, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's all distraction.
Why do we need to see George Clooney's wedding?
It's easier than seeing everything that's going on in the rest of the world, I guess. All right, let's jump to this last one. Robert Dresner in Virginia wants to know, so instead of running for president, would you instead run for Congress?
No. I'd go crazy and I'd end up being a statistic, having committed suicide. I don't say never, but I've only been in the executive branch. I've been a mayor, I've been a governor, and I like to make my own decisions now and not be part of necessarily a team. So even though you're a team in the executive branch, the buck stops with one guy. In the Senate and in Congress, the buck stops with hundreds of them. You know, you've got 100 senators and you've got, 300, 400 and some congressmen. You're just one of many. You're a drop in the pond. And at this point in my life, I'm 63. I ain't got time to go fight the wars of being in the legislative branch and have to suck up. You think they'd let me on any committee? An independent like me if I went to Congress? Hell, I'd be lucky to be chairman of the grave committee that leads funerals. You know, that'd be the best committee they'd put me on, an independent like me. Although I could be a power broker in the Senate because you got 2 senators that are already independent, and if I became a third one and we formed a tight 3 coalition, and if they couldn't get a majority without our votes, I take that back. Angus King, Bernie Sanders, and I could become powerful if we did that in the current system, because then they'd have to suck up to us and give us anything we wanted to get our 3 votes if it were that close. So there is that opportunity, but we'll end it with that. Right now, I have no desire to do that. I'm having too much fun. Remember that. Hanging out with Democrats and Republicans, after about 2 years, you feel like you need a shower. All right, thanks for your questions and comments. Keep sending them to Aura TV, and maybe I'll answer your question on the air of We the People Are Off the Grid. Now it's time for this week's guest, former Baltimore Ravens player Chris Carr. A few weeks ago, the American public became aware of a horrifying domestic violence incident between Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice and his then-fiancée, Janae Palmer. And how has the NFL responded? With fumbling press conferences, inconsistent statements, and attempted cover-ups. Rice is currently on indefinite NFL suspension. But what happens next? I'd like to welcome someone who can maybe shed a little light on the inner workings of this organization, former Baltimore Ravens player Chris Carr. Welcome to We the People. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Governor. How are you?
I'm doing good. Now, first off, how did you, now sometimes they write these questions for me, Chris, and I kind of go off a piece of paper and that, but some of them are kind of, as I read them, they get silly. How did you first get your start as a pro football player? Well, you tried out and got drafted, right?
Yeah. I think you had to play football in college, and I actually was undrafted, and I made the team my rookie year in 2005, and I played 9 seasons. So I was undrafted in 2005, played 9 years, and that's usually how it goes. Usually you sign as an undrafted free agent or you're drafted.
That, and that's pretty interesting. So you were not drafted. They didn't think highly enough of you to draft you, yet you were good enough, exceptional enough to last 9 years in that league. That is something to be very proud of, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I went to little old Boise State, and back in the days when I was at Boise State didn't really have a lot of national respect. So when they saw my resume, they just kind of looked at me just like, oh, he went to a small school. He didn't go to Georgia. He didn't play in the SEC, so he really can't be that good. And I kind of doubted myself a little bit as well. But once I got there and I realized, I felt that I was better than everybody else that was there. And I played more years than everybody that was drafted in my draft class in Oakland.
Well, that's excellent. Now, you were what, a defensive back?
Yeah, I played quarterback, and I also did punt returns and kickoff returns as well.
Oh, kickoff returns and cornerback. So you saw plenty of action being on those special teams.
Yeah.
And, anyway, you played for the Vikings for a little while, didn't you?
Yeah, I was there in Eden Prairie for a little while during the off-season of 2012, and I ended up playing with the San Diego Chargers that year. I actually maintained my residency there, so I was actually in Minnesota for the whole off-season of 2013.
Okay, yeah, as it says, you played for 5 teams, the New Orleans Saints, the San Diego Chargers, the Baltimore Ravens, Tennessee Titans, and Oakland Raiders. So you saw a lot of teams with a lot of administrations, and are they all pretty much the same, or does it differ from team to team?
They were all pretty much the same. When I was in Oakland, Al Davis was still alive. So that organization was a little different. Al Davis made all the decisions, even when it came to the coaching. He would tell us what plays we could run, what plays we couldn't run. and other organizations aren't like that. Some organizations are better run than other organizations, but they're all relatively pretty much the same.
Now, let me ask this, Chris. How the hell did Al Davis play football?
No, he didn't play football. He did coach
then
before he started.
Wait, though. Okay, all right. Yeah, he did coach. That's right. So I'll give him that credit, because I was going to say, how the hell would he know what to run?
Yeah, because even if you did coach, you're not there in the meetings. You're not there every single day. So it's kind of hard to really, when you have the bird's eye view of everything that's going on, it's kind of hard to dictate what your team should be doing. And plus, he was kind of a little bit behind the times. But I don't want to speak badly about Davis. He is past. But
sure,
there are a lot of good things to say about Al Davis that people don't give him enough credit that he's due.
Oh, absolutely. Win, baby, win. Love his quote, because that's what it's truly all about. Win, baby, win. As long as you win, everything's okay.
Yeah.
Now, I've made mention of this, Chris, that do you think domestic abuse is any more prevalent in the NFL than it is in society itself?
No, I don't think it's any more prevalent. I just think that America loves football. Football is the most popular sport in the nation. So whenever anything like this happens in the media, and especially now with the internet, with TMZ, and everything encompassing, you take the totality of everything, whenever an incident happens in the NFL, it's going to be magnified more so than any other professional league.
Yeah, because that's the feeling I had on it. I thought, okay, there's roughly, about 2,000 players in the league, I heard, roughly? Is that a good round figure?
Yeah, there's a lot of people. So there's 50-man roster, then you have 8 players that are on practice squad.
Sure.
Once you going into training camp, you might have close to 100 people on a team. And so if there's any incidents during the off-season, too, as well, you have close to 100 players that are on a football team. And so there's a lot of people that can get in trouble. So if you look at just the aggregate of all the numbers in the NFL, I think most guys in the NFL are good guys, but it only takes a couple of bad apples to make everybody else look extremely bad.
Absolutely. But the point I wanted to make, Chris, was being, to me, anybody that makes it to the NFL is an elite football player, because I played football through high school. I played 2 years after, service ball, and 1 year of college, and that pretty much was it for me. To make it to that level, you have to be an exceptional football player, because as you climb that ladder, of course, fewer and fewer survive it. And I don't think there's any more truly violence in those 2,000 players than if you went out into a community of 2,000 people. I bet your domestic abuse would be pretty much the same.
Yes, it'd be exactly the same. I don't think the demographics in the NFL is any different than any random number of 2,000 people that you could select here in America.
Now, let me ask you this, Chris. Here's the problem I got with the situation, and it may be an unpopular position a little bit, but how can they punish someone before they have their day in court?
Yes, and that's one of the things with the NFL is that the justice system it's arbitrary. It's all based off of Roger Goodell, and it's all based off public perception. And especially now being in law school, when you learn about the law, you want the law to be consistent, you want it to be predictable, and you want it to be fair. And the NFL's policy is not predictable, it's not consistent, and it's not fair. So everything look at... Go ahead.
No, I agree, because, okay, allegations against Adrian Peterson, allegations of domestic abuse. How come they don't have to wait until the person is tried and convicted, then they can sentence them on their end? Because let's say, for example, the Peterson case. Let's say, okay, Peterson's suspended right now. He's not playing. Obviously, it hurts the Vikings tremendous, because arguably Adrian's the best running back in the league. Or if he ain't, he's close to it. And they have to play without him. Now, hypothetically, what happens if he goes in the first hearing in October and the charges, Rusty Hardin's great, he's a great expensive lawyer, and you can bet, I know this well enough, it does matter who your lawyer is when you go to court. Let's say Hardin gets it all thrown out and charges are dropped. Well, then the NFL just subjected Peterson to punishment, and he was never punished by society. That's the problem I have with it, Chris. I think they should be waiting until the court system's done before the NFL moves to whatever they're going to do, punishment on their end. Because you don't see it that way in private business, like if with 3M or with another General Motors or the Ford plant. If someone gets in trouble, you're not fired or suspended from your job until you're convicted in court.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the problems with the NFL is that it's all based off of Roger Goodell. And this arbitrary rule has really backfired because it's always been unfair for a lot of players. I've seen players over the years that have done minor things and they've been punished pretty harshly, and I've seen other players that have gone another round, done some pretty harsh things, and they haven't really been punished that much. But once, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay, Chris. I got a good one for you. You're in law school right now, right?
Yes.
So you understand the law and how it works. And I think that, again, the NFL should be waiting until convictions happen and not, insisting upon their own judgment before the trials happen.
Yeah, but that's the way they negotiated it in the CBA. You should have more than one person that gets to levy the punishment on the individual players. But once you do have a system like this, I always say if jaywalking was a public outrage, you would have players suspended up to 6 games for jaywalking. Because it's not based off of what's fair. It's based off what the public deems as justice. And so that's what you see. If the public wants domestic violence to be punished more harshly, which it should be more harshly than in pretty much all these other crimes when it comes to like marijuana and all these other suspensions, then that's what the punishment's going to be. Now, the thing with Roger Goodell did, which they tried to cover this up. They were like, hey, this video hasn't come out yet. This is a good player. We want him to be in the league. And so we're going to cover this up. We don't want anybody to see this. And it ended up backfiring because once that video came out, and there's always going to be a visceral reaction when people actually see the visceral picture, then everybody's going to be calling for his head and looking at the system. And that's what happens.
Chris, what I found a bit strange about that whole situation, me personally, they made the big reaction after the second video came out that TMZ released where you actually saw Rice strike Janae. You actually saw the punch. I didn't need that to know he hit her.
Yeah.
When you see a woman walk into an elevator upright and prone and she comes out unconscious being drug out, you don't exactly have to be a Rhodes Scholar to figure out that somebody knocked her out.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely. That's what I say. A lot of people don't base things off of reason. I think just a visceral, emotional reaction, it plays more heavily than just based off of reason. I mean, you hear this about during Vietnam, when people heard about the dead bodies, it wasn't as bad, but when they saw photographs of funerals and body bags and pictures, then that's when it really has the emotional effect. And when people can actually see something, people react differently. And my whole contention was, we already knew he hit her. There's nothing different that's happened. It's just like it's like the incident never happened. Then once we saw the picture, it actually happened.
Yep.
And it shouldn't be like that. And the one thing I want to say about the situation too is that if you are going to have an arbitrary rule, if you are not going to wait until the courts, until your players have a day in court, then you should punish domestic violence, what Ray Rice did, more harshly than 2 games, because there's a lot of players that did things that were way less offensive than what Ray Rice did, and they got more than 2-game suspensions.
Oh, yeah. Now, I got a good one for you, Chris, that I wanted. You're the law student. I'm going to pose a good one for you that I want you to respond to here.
Okay.
2 states in the United States now, Washington and Colorado, have made recreational use of marijuana legal. Now, if you play for the Denver Broncos or the Seattle Seahawks and you live in that state where marijuana is legal, how can they possibly prosecute you for it then if you use it?
Well, if you're in a private business and your private business has a different bylaws, you can have your.
I knew you were going to come along with that, Chris. I knew you'd come up with the business law degree.
But you could say your business could say, hey, if you wear sweaters, then you'll be fired. You're not allowed to wear sweaters. That might be your constitutional right to wear sweaters, but you could still get fired because that's part of your contractual obligation.
But you would have a legit court case, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would have a legit court case, and I think a lot of times I have learned in my first year of law school is that sometimes you argue cases even though you're not going to win them, because sometimes if you have a lawyer and you keep arguing cases, then the law changes if they feel like it's unjust.
Sure.
So even if lawyers and the clients felt like, hey, you're probably not going to win, but eventually this might get the courts to change and might get the league to change their opinion on things, then it would be in your best interest to go ahead and try to file a suit of wrongful termination, because that's how you really get laws changed in this country.
Yeah, because I'm going to find it very interesting to see how they react to that, because you have 2 states now that have legalized the recreational use of marijuana. I've been through Colorado and I've seen it in operation, and I don't see anything particularly wrong with it at all. It's bringing in great tax revenue and all that if they just go all the way with it, which they have. Colorado was smart. Did you know they put it on their state constitution?
No, I didn't know they did that. That was smart.
Oh, yeah. So no politicians can come in 2 years from now and vote it against the law again. The only way it can be changed back in Colorado is for it to go in front of the people and have it removed from the Constitution. So they were very brilliant in Colorado in what they did. But it's going to be interesting to watch and see how they handle this, because if you play for the Denver Broncos and you play in a state where marijuana is legal, how the hell can the NFL tell you can't use it?
Yeah, it's so hypocritical, too, because you can go to an NFL function where there's alcohol and they'll serve you alcohol, and you can go to a coach's house and drink alcohol, but then you can't smoke marijuana. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and I've always laughed this way, Chris. I've told people this. I said, marijuana people don't bother anybody. If you give them a Jimi Hendrix tape, they'll go sit in a corner for hours and you won't hear nothing from them.
Oh yeah, and even other sorts of drugs too. I've been around people that have been on a lot of sorts of drugs, but it's a lot of those alcoholics or people that are stumbling around that are drunk. Those are the people you want to be wary about.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'll give you a quick story, Chris. I was over in Amsterdam, Holland, where, of course, everything's pretty much legal, from prostitution to marijuana to everything. And I was talking to a cab driver there, which you always do if you want to get the local on anything. And the biggest holiday in Amsterdam is called Queen's Day, and they hold it in the spring. And the cabbie told me the government of Holland was thinking of banning alcohol on Queen's Day. And I looked at him and said, you got to be kidding me. I said, Holland, where everything's legal, they're going to ban alcohol? Why? He said, well, bad behavior, people throwing up, people breaking things, urinating in the street, the typical behavior that happens in heavily drinking parties and what goes on. So I said to the cabbie, I says, well, since they're going to ban alcohol, or maybe banning alcohol on Queen's Day, and over there it's called cannabis. I said, does that mean they'll ban cannabis on Queen's Day? And the cabbie looked at me like I was nuts. He looked at me and he goes, are you kidding? He said, the cannabis smokers don't bother anyone.
Yeah, it's funny.
And I thought, there's your answer, people. Here you've got a place that allows both behaviors, and they're thinking of stopping the alcohol because of the bad behavior, and the cannabis smokers don't bother anybody because, to me, cannabis doesn't instill that type of behavior in a person, but that's here nor there. Anyway, though, Chris, you spent 9 years in the NFL. Did you witness any other cover-ups that went on in the NFL besides, what's going on with the domestic abuse stuff today?
No, I never witnessed any other cover-ups, but I had a feeling that this was going to be a cover-up, because from the start I said the video has to be out there. How do they have video of him dragging her out the elevator, but they don't have a picture of them actually in the elevator? So I knew TMZ or somebody was going to release the video. And it doesn't surprise me, because the NFL, and I'm not really sure why they're so paranoid, is that they're so concerned about public perception. And so they go through whatever lengths they can go to. They're trying to paint their league in the most positive light. And once you do that and you do a bunch of unscrupulous things, it's eventually going to backfire.
Yeah, and it's too bad. But you know what? Their ratings haven't suffered, I don't think. The latest I've heard is everybody's still watching. And I kind of go back, Charles Barkley's a good friend of mine, and I love Charles, and I love his free speech and how he's not afraid to say. And I loved it a few years back when Charles Barkley came out with that ad and said, I'm not a role model, I'm a basketball player.
Yeah.
And I think we as a society need to distinguish that. Pro football players are phenomenal at what they do. They're the best at playing football. They're the elite just to get to that level. but they're not necessarily role models. They're professional football players. And we as a society have to, I think, quit putting them on pedestals. They're real people that have the same problems many times as everyone else, and they may make bad decisions like everyone else. Why? Because they're pro football players. I used to talk about it in wrestling, where I talked about wrestling has no union, we have no benefits, and I said, we're not financial planners, we're wrestlers. How many wrestlers, when they end up retiring, don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of? So we need that type of help. And I think football players are the same way. They don't have time to be all things to everyone in order to be that elite pro football player. Am I correct in that thinking?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct, and it's unrealistic expectations. And the way I view athletes, not just football players, as role models, and which I'm going to try to instill in my kids, is that whenever you're a role model or perceive somebody as being a role model, you only take something that you know. So say you take Tiger Woods, and he had his whole scandal, and everybody was upset with him. You look at, okay, what is his work ethic? He outworked every other golfer. His intensity, his attention to detail. Now, you can take that and you can apply that to any area in your life. You can apply that to being a good husband, being a good citizen, or being good at whatever job that you do have. And so if you just looked at athletes of what you know about them, you can apply that in any aspect of your life. But once you start trying to implement all these qualities into people that you're not sure if they have or not, I think if people just look at these athletes and be like, okay, we know Peyton Manning, he works harder than everybody, he pays attention to detail. I can take that in anything in my life and apply that. I think if we look at athletes in that sense, I think a lot of people won't be disappointed, and you won't have all these arguments about, oh, this guy fell from grace.
Well, I got to agree with you, Chris, because I'm going to be Jesse Ventura now and say something controversial. I love golf. I'm addicted to it. I play it whenever I can. I'm mad today because it's a sunny day and I'm in here doing a show and not golfing. But I'm going to say something funny here. Tiger, when he was misbehaving, was winning. Now that he's not misbehaving anymore, he ain't winning anymore. And so I like the Tiger who was winning because, to be honest with you, Chris, I only cared about Tiger on the course.
Yeah.
Tiger's private life, I didn't care about it. That's Tiger's business.
Yeah.
Whatever his private life was, that's his business. I cared about watching Tiger win golf tournaments, make shots, everything about him. I loved watching Tiger play. And ever since he's cleaned up, he's not winning. So, as a fan,
injuries too. He is older. He has a lot of injuries now.
I understand. I understand that. But as a fan, I wish he'd go back to his bad behavior and start winning again.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans feel that way. But like if Tiger Woods, just take his work ethic and apply that to any aspect of your life, and he's a role model in that sense. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's what you're completely correct in that, Chris, that people need to look at the athlete in that aspect.
Yeah.
He's a role model in what he does on the football field, but that doesn't necessarily make him a role model when he's off the football field.
Yes. And like you said, it's unrealistic to put that expectation on somebody. Like you said, you're a wrestler, you learn to wrestle. That's what you do.
Yep. Now I got to ask you, how the hell can the NFL be a nonprofit?
They worked that out. They worked that out with legislation a long time ago.
Unbelievable.
They did a good job.
A good job? Are you kidding me? That's the biggest scam, Chris, I've ever heard. How can anybody say the NFL is a nonprofit? Is there anyone in the NFL that works for free?
No, there's not. There's not.
I don't believe there is.
No.
Do they pay the cheerleaders? Maybe the cheerleaders are part of a nonprofit. I don't know, because I've heard that they got horrible conditions. But how in hell can they call the NFL a nonprofit when everybody involved in it is making a profit?
Yeah, they made sure it was written into the law. I mean, if you read the law, it says.
Oh, I know what they did.
You know what it says, yeah.
I know what they did. But Chris, you and I both
right
know.
Or they should. I'm just saying what they did. Yeah.
Exactly. We're not advocating it's right, and we know it ain't right. That's laughable to sit and say the NFL's a nonprofit. There ain't one person that's not making a profit. You know what? Let's go back in time, Chris Carr. Growing up, who were your athletic idols? Who did you idolize when you were a kid?
Michael Jordan and Jerry Rice and Oscar De La Hoya. Those are the athletes that I loved when I was a kid.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you like basketball with Michael, and,
Yeah.
and obviously you must like boxing then to get De La Hoya in there.
Yeah, I'm a huge boxing fan. So De La Hoya growing up, I loved watching him. And Michael Jordan, back in the 90s, he was the biggest deal in the world. He was the biggest athlete in the world, most popular. And I wanted to be like Michael Jordan. And I was really good when I was younger, but I didn't get too much taller than 5'10", so it's hard when you're short to play basketball.
Well, I'm happy to say I actually played 18-hole round of golf with Michael, and I'll tell you what, the son of a gun, he can hit the ball a long way too.
Yeah, he's a competitor. He's a great athlete.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he isn't the greatest golfer in the world, but he loves the game, and I'll tell you, he hits it an awful long way. No doubt about that.
Did you beat him?
No. Michael's better than I am. He's a better golfer than I am. But I can beat Charles, though.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
In fact, I can beat Barkley every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Charles has a mental problem. He can't swing on a course if you've ever seen him. Let's move on.
He hasn't gotten any better?
No, he needs to go see somebody and get something done to him mentally. He needs to be hypnotized or something. But anyway, let's move to politics, Chris, because I know being in law school, politics may be on your horizon. Now they tell me that you're a Ron Paul supporter. Is that true?
Yes. Well, he's done. He's not in Congress anymore, but yes, I was. Yes, definitely.
I am too. Rest assured, I am too. And the more of us that are Ron Paul supporters, the better it is, I believe, for this country. Do you agree?
Oh, yes, definitely. People should have this independent way of thinking and think of politicians in a different way.
What is it that you liked about Ron Paul? Are you a libertarian, Chris?
Yeah, I would say libertarian, classic liberal. Labels, they kind of get in the way of things. Independent. I kind of just think for myself. But the first time I saw Ron Paul, I think it was 2011 at a Republican presidential debate. And he was being booed. I think it was in South Carolina. And whenever a politician says something on national TV in front of the audience that's going to get booed, I know he's telling the truth. I know he's being sincere. I know he's not trying to pander. So there was this sincerity that he had that was different than any politician that I had seen up to that point in my life. And after that, I read his book, Liberty Defined, and I really started looking into libertarianism. And it's funny because I was a political science major, but I never studied Milton Friedman or Friedrich Hayek or Brian Kaplan or David Friedman or any of these libertarian thinkers. And I really just started doing my own self-study and really kind of coming to grips of what do I believe in, what is the proper role of government. And I kind of just formulated my views. Probably after a year, I'd probably consider myself no longer a Democrat. But after a year and a half, I would say I feel comfortable calling myself a libertarian, classic liberal. And in 2012, I ended up voting for Gary Johnson in the presidential election. But it was really that Ron Paul, he was the impetus for me to change my views. Because up to that point in time, I was a Democrat.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I told Dr. Paul if he would have quit the Republican Party and ran as an independent, I would run with him.
Yeah.
But why was it, Chris, that he would never break away from the Republicans? I understand why he used them initially, but after they kicked him out the door, they weren't going to give him a chance in hell. I mean, I remember when he'd finished second in the primary and he wouldn't even be mentioned.
Yeah.
They'd be mentioning Santorum or something who got 1% of the vote. And Paul was finishing a strong second, almost winning, and they wouldn't even talk about him. Why wouldn't Dr. Paul, when it was all over with the Republicans, I could never figure out why he never bolted and ran as a libertarian, because he had all the followers would have gone with him. And like I told him personally, I said, if you'll quit the Republican Party, I'll run with you. I'll be your VP if you want me to be that. Why wouldn't he do it, do you think, Chris? Why did he stay with the Republicans till the bitter end?
I'm not sure. I mean, you have to ask him. I'm not sure if he's ever given you an answer. But to speculate, I mean, I guess I would say that I think the only way to penetrate the system is to change the Republican Party. And maybe he doesn't think it's viable that there'll ever be a third party that has any type of weight in any type of election. So maybe that's why. Because some people think that you have to work within the system, and it's a two-party dominant system, and maybe he just thought the only way I'm going to change the course of this country is if I feel like the Republican Party changes its roles and really kind of turn the Republican Party into a quasi-libertarian party as well. So maybe that was the aspect that was the route he wanted to go. But I'm not sure. I'm only speculating.
Sure. And I could understand him doing that until they finally slammed the door on him.
Yeah.
At that point, you're going to realize you're not going to change that party after they've booted you out the door and slammed the door on you and called you names and everything along with it. What would you say your chances of going into politics are going to be in the future, Chris?
I would say 20%. It was higher a couple years ago. I guess right now I really just love the law, and I really want to do something in that aspect. And I really think that people that go into politics, they should go into it because they're already established and they're doing this because they're really principled. They're not doing this because, I want this to be my job. There's nothing worse than a politician that sits there in public and acts like, there's nobody else that can do this job. And then they're just going to be unprincipled and just continue to do it because there's nothing else that they're qualified to do because that's all they've been doing their whole entire lives.
But being you like the law so much, going into politics would give you the chance to make the laws.
Yes, that's definitely. And I guess a lot of times, too, when I'm thinking about politics, I'm thinking about on a national level. But I think about the route that you went with in Minnesota. Within a state, you were governor in a state, and local government too. That could be a type of route I can go into as well. But yeah, so I'm not sure. Right now it's about 20%, but that could jump substantially in the next couple of years.
Sure.
But I just don't know right now.
Well, maybe you don't know either. I was a mayor, actually, before I was governor. I was mayor of the sixth largest city in Minnesota from 1990 to 1994.
Oh, okay. How was that?
See, the media didn't bring that out, that I actually had 4 years as a mayor.
Yeah.
And then I went back to the private sector for 4 years before I came out and ran for governor. They didn't want to give me any credibility that, this guy's actually governed the sixth largest city in the state. And so he does have experience in governing, but they didn't want to talk about that too much. Anyway, Chris, we're getting to the point now, which is where it's fun.
Okay.
So if you'll participate with me, Chris.
Yeah.
Now it's time. I do this on all my podcasts. It's called If I Were President.
Okay.
So today will be If I Were President with Chris Carr. So that's what we're going to play, Chris, and let's pretend that you, Chris Carr, are elected president in 2016. Give me your rapid-fire responses to these questions, and don't take this too seriously, otherwise it's not fun. Got it?
Okay, I got it.
So you can be serious, but have fun with it if you'd like. Now,
okay.
These are rapid-fire responses, so we won't hold you to them, hopefully. On a podcast, they're not going to drum them up later and say, Chris, we heard, well, although they might. Let me warn you that. With today's media, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Especially if you get in politics. Okay, here we go. The rapid fire. Chris Carr's the 2016 president. Here we go on Jesse's We the People podcast. Chris, the first thing you do in the Oval Office. What's the first thing? You've been elected president, and what's the first thing you do if you walked into the Oval Office?
I'd get all my military advisors together. I'd see what is all the wasteful spending that we're doing, and I'd probably try to cut all the extraneous activities that we have throughout the world and all the counterproductive policies that we have when it comes to our military, because that you have the most power when it comes to your commander-in-chief. So I'd really try to cut down on our militarism across the world.
Wow. I love it, Chris, but there was nothing funny about that. That's dead serious. Very good.
Oh.
Don't get me wrong. A fantastic answer. All right.
I would have everybody wear suits with their with all the money from all their
NASCAR suits. Yeah, NASCAR. I've advocated that for years now. That all candidates should be required to wear NASCAR suits so we know who owns them. That way we can be intelligent voters. We'll know who owns the guy. There you go. Okay, Question 2, Chris Carr. Who's the first person you'd hire?
Jesse Ventura.
Really? To do what?
I'd hire him.
To do what?
Yeah.
What would you have me do?
I would have you be Secretary of State.
Okay, certainly not your press secretary. You'd get in trouble then.
No, not the press
Yeah,
secretary.
you don't want me for that.
You would intimidate the media, though. That'd be good.
Okay, I'd be your Secretary of State. I appreciate that. Here's a good one you'll like, Chris. And remember, you're the president, so you really got the full spectrum of the world here.
Okay.
Who's the first person you'd want to meet?
Meet?
Anybody, you're the president. Who don't meet the president? Everybody. So who's the first person you as president would want to meet?
Probably Putin. I'd go meet Putin.
Putin?
Yes.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Interesting answer. Yeah. Very interesting answer. Okay, Putin. Number 4, which comedian would you pick for your first White House Correspondents' Dinner?
Oh, Chris Rock. Definitely.
Chris Rock?
Yeah.
That'd be a good one. That'd be a good one. Okay. Now, question 5. The president you'd want to model yourself after. Is there one president that if you were president you'd want to model, you'd want to be him to be the model for you?
Thomas Jefferson, he was pretty good. He was one of the main reasons why there's a Bill of Rights. He was good. I think, it's kind of hard. It would have to be kind of 19th century presidents, because once you get into the modern era, I look at a lot of these presidents, I'm like, I'm not sure about them.
Okay. You know what my response would have been to that on 5?
What?
I would have said John F. Kennedy, because he was the best. He served the least time. That's what made him the best. That's why he served the least.
Yeah, you can't really say anything about it, yeah.
They had to get rid of JFK, and they did it. They didn't want him around, because anyway. So now our final segment with Chris Carr, we have some social media questions and comments from fans. Chris, you ready?
Yes.
We'll get your response to these. Teddy on Twitter asks, what are your thoughts on the studies concerning concussions and mental illness in NFL players? Were you aware of this pre-career? If not, would you have played anyway?
No, I wasn't aware of this pre-career. I would have played anyway, but I would probably would have played just as long. But it's just one of those risks you're going to have to go out there and take. And I played cornerback, so I wasn't in the trenches like linebacker, hitting on every single play. So my position was a little less violent than other positions.
Chris, did you ever get concussed?
No, I was fortunate. I mean, I think I've got my bell rung a little bit, and you can kind of count that.
Well, that's a concussion. That's a concussion. That's the old terminology. If you got your bell rung, you got a concussion. So, if you got your bell rung, then you did.
I mean, I've gotten hit hard, but nothing where I had a headache for a long time when I thought I had a concussion.
Okay. My worst was actually in high school.
Really?
I played defensive end, and we were playing our rival. I went to Roosevelt High School, South Minneapolis. We were playing Minneapolis Washburn, and their fullback, Al Hendrickson, and I was a defensive end. We kind of collided helmet to helmet.
Yeah.
And that happened in the third quarter. I vaguely remember anything. All I remember is there was 5:51 to go in the fourth quarter when I came out of it.
Yeah, I don't have anything like that.
And I'll always remember that. I looked up at the clock, and there was 5:51 to go, and I couldn't remember anything that had happened previous third quarter. This was the fourth quarter now. But my coaches were good enough. I never re-entered the game. I was out for the rest of that game and never played till the following week. So I got by a little lucky.
Yeah, that was good.
Michael Moritz on Facebook asks, what sort of future do you see for the sport, especially due to the pending lawsuits concerning long-term injuries? Do you think that football will suffer with these lawsuits?
No, I think the NFL would have to start actively killing people in this nation and molesting kids for football to go down the drain. It's too it's too instilled in everybody's DNA now. America loves football, and even if you lose a little bit of fans, the core diehard fans, they're not going away. It's going to be really hard for the football to not be America's most favorite sport. So it's going to be hard for that to happen.
Okay. John Adams on Facebook writes, I would like to know his stance for the salary and pay that all players receive. Do players feel entitled to that sort of pay grade?
Do they feel entitled? I don't know. You're going to have to ask a lot of players. But when it comes to any private field, you usually receive what your marginal product is. And you look at all the revenue that NFL generates, and the players that are on the field, they're going to get a portion of that. And so if you look at fairness at different jobs, I mean, if you look at a neurosurgeon, what he's doing, he's saving lives. He probably should get paid $100 million a life. If you really value a life, $100 million or $10 million, they should get paid a lot more. But when it comes to capitalism, people usually get their marginal product, and I don't really like going on what somebody deserves, what somebody doesn't deserve. It should be based off economics.
Okay, here's kind of a strange question, but interesting. Donald Morrison on Facebook wants to know, what is your opinion of the experience with gay players? Also, Michael Lewis said the NFL locker room is the complete opposite of the catty Major League Baseball clubhouse. What are your thoughts on clubhouse dynamics, and are players really as tight as Lewis intimates?
I think I probably played with 2 players. I think I had a little suspicion that they might have been gay, but I'm not positive. But I mean, I look at everybody the same, so I never had a problem with anything. They were just the same as everybody else.
Chris, you know what's interesting for me on that? I served, 6 years in the United States Navy underwater demolition SEAL team.
Yeah.
And my position has always been, people say, well, what do you feel about gays in the military? I said, wait a minute. We're the United States of America. We're not the hetero states of America. I said, if a gay person wants to serve their country, I shake their hand and say thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
That's
crazy.
simple. And all I care about is, can they get the job done?
Yeah.
I don't care what their sexual preference is. I care that when it comes time to nitty-gritty, will they be there?
Yeah.
And will they get the job done? And if that happens, I could care less about whether they're gay or not. It has no meaning to me whatsoever. It's none of my business.
Yeah, the way I viewed it, it was just like, oh, that person might be gay. Oh, that person might be a Republican. Oh, that person likes this music. It was just like a characteristic that person had. It had nothing to do with any moral cognition or anything. So.
Here's one for you. Steve Crawshower on Facebook asks, it's my belief that a big part of the social problem, violence, alcohol, drugs, etc., in the NFL is the salary cap. I say this because the salary cap dictates that mid and upper level veteran players be cut to allow for the high price and high performance players to be paid big money, thus removing a lot of veteran leadership.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the salary cap in general? And I'd like to piggyback the short-lived 1 year of the XFL that Vince McMahon had. We had a lot of NFL players that were victims of that. They were 5-year veterans, and because they were required to be paid so much, they were literally cut, and rookies were put on the team because they could pay them less than what they could the 5-year veteran. He makes a point. They lose veteran leadership because of a salary cap. Do you believe that?
I think you lose veterans. Because I think the minimum wage in the NFL is too high. But having said that, when it comes to the veteran leadership, a lot of these younger players, it's going to be hard to change their nature. If you have a guy that's around that's going to go out and get in trouble, it's going to be very hard just because you have veterans on the team. It's not like you have veterans on the team, they're just going to automatically listen to this player because they've been in the league for 5-6 years. And veteran players, too, they usually have families, they have different responsibilities, and they can't be going around holding people's hand and making sure that they don't get in trouble. So I don't really think players getting in trouble has anything to do with lack of the veterans. And when it comes to the salary cap, too, it's kind of like one of those double-edged swords. I mean, you look at it, you're just like, okay, yes, the minimums are too high, and maybe you shouldn't have a salary cap. But that is one of the reasons why the NFL is so competitive, because every single team starts at the same place. And that's one of the reasons why the games are so close, and that any team, any given year can be good. So it's kind of one of those things like choose your poison.
Oh, I agree with you, Chris. That's the one thing about the NFL. Whoever won last year has no guarantee of winning this year. Look at Atlanta. They were right on the verge of contending and going to the Super Bowl, and a year later, they're the second or third pick in the draft.
Yeah.
It's amazing the up and down. You have no idea at the start of the season. Nobody can predict who's going to end up in that final Super Bowl. And that's one of the great things about the NFL is that it does have that parity from year to year. I don't think you're ever going to see a dynasty anymore in the NFL where you're going to see one team making it to the Super Bowl 3 or 4 years in a row. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. Anyway, Daryl Constantine on Twitter wants to know, how do you think the new HGH testing will affect players' performance in 2015 season? What do you make of the new NFL drug testing policy in general?
It's interesting because over the last couple of years, there's been discussions in locker rooms about HGH, and it's one of those secretive things because you know that certain players have been on it, and you heard rumors, but you don't know for sure because everybody who's been taking HGH has been really silent about it. So it will be interesting because I really have no clue what percentage of players take it. If I had to guess what the percentage of players take HGH, I would say it's probably just a modicum of the players. But you never know. It might have an effect, but I don't think it'll have a substantial effect because I really don't think that many players are on it. But then again, I might be wrong.
Well, there used to be a thing when I was in the bodybuilding gyms when the steroids were heavy.
Yeah.
And we used to have a standard thing. Everybody's on steroids except the guy you're talking to. That was no, because the guy you're talking to is going to tell you he ain't taking them.
Yeah.
So you just assume everyone's on steroids except the guy you're talking to.
Yeah.
Anyway, finally, last question for you, Chris. Roberta Newcomb on Facebook writes, do you think we hold pro athletes to a higher standard of morals than our elected officials?
The elected officials, I'd probably say no. You look at Anthony Weiner, if that was a football player, he probably still going to have a career in the NFL. So I don't think they're held to a higher standard. I think the standard that they're held to is probably a little bit too high, like we were talking about when it comes to people perceiving NFL players as these moral role models. But I don't think they're held to a higher standard than politicians.
Okay. Well, Chris, I want to say to you, thank you for coming on the podcast, We the People, today. It was fun to talk with you and talk football. And so thank you very much. Good luck at GW in your law school, and hope you graduate with honors, because after all, Chris, one thing our country needs is another lawyer, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Governor. I appreciate it.
I got to gig you a little bit on that, Chris.
Yeah, but like you said before, everybody hates lawyers except their lawyer. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and good luck. I hope you graduate with honors. It'll be fun to watch your career. And so thank you to Chris Carr for coming on We the People. That's it for today. And again, I want to thank my guest, Chris Carr, for joining me for this We the People podcast. And remember, people, Chris will tell you this too. Stay vigilant. It's what Washington, Jefferson, and Adams warned us we had to do for this republic to survive.
This is Corolla Digital.